So the webinar started.
To put the code in the public space and ensure that we continue to engage with everyone to ensure that it is accepted globally. It's therefore my pleasure to welcome you all to this seminar, webinar. And let me just do a little housekeeping or a little introduction. Our host for today, who incidentally is also the moderator of this program, is the chairman of the Ethics Committee of the Institute, Mrs. Amina Oyagbola, fellow of the Institute. Ms. Amina Oyagbola, you're welcome, madam.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our chief host, the president and chairman of the Governing Council of the Institute, Dr. Mrs. Ije Jidema. Madam President, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, DG.
Thank you. And of course, our guest speaker is a major player in Nigeria corporate world. And it's my pleasure to welcome here this morning, Mrs. Mosun Bello Olushoga. Madam, you're welcome. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone.
You're welcome, ma. And we also have with us today a very eminent corporate player who will be discussing the role of directors in fostering ethical behavior in organizations and in the workplace and compliance in the workplace. And it's my pleasure to introduce, I will start with the lady, Mrs. Yemisi Ayeni. You're welcome, madam.
Thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am. And of course, backed by the power of the law, we have here with us a senior advocate of Nigeria and a well-known player, especially in corporate governance and ethics, Professor Fabian Ajogu, the senior advocate of Nigeria. Professor, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And also with us is somebody who has played a very significant role in waking up an organization that I want to use the right word here, the right words here. An organization that was, maybe let's just the word dozing, and it's been acknowledged everywhere in the country for that feat. He has left the stage now, but he has still been very, very active in the corporate world. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Segun Oloketui. Oloketui, you're welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. And I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, the moderator will give you a little bit of insight into who each of our discussants, panelists, and guest speakers are. I will not be doing that, so I don't take a job. But it's my pleasure now to invite to give our opening remarks the chairman of the Ethics Committee of the Institute, Mrs. Amina Oyagbola. Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you very much, DG. What an honor to be on this platform with such distinguished personalities this morning. Madam President, members of the Governing Council and Executive Committee of the Institute of Directors of Nigeria, our distinguished keynote speaker, an Amazon, my sister, a role model, and so much more. Mrs. Mosun Olushoga, Bello Olushoga, eminent panelists, and I'll be commenting on each of them personally very shortly, esteemed members of the Institute of Directors, esteemed members of the Ethics Committee, friends, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to warmly welcome you all to this webinar today. We are indeed honored by your esteemed presence, and thank you most sincerely for setting aside the time to be a part of this event in your very busy schedule, but I assure you it's going to be well worth it. Madam President, members of the Governing Council and Executive Committee of the Institute, let me start by extending on behalf of the Ethics Committee of the Institute of Directors, Nigeria, our very deep appreciation to you all for the unwavering support given to the committee, to carry out the mandate that was given to it. I would also like to extend my profound gratitude to the esteemed keynote speaker and the distinguished panelists on this platform who have accepted our formal invitation to share their wealth of experience and insights on this very important topic of ethics and ethical leadership. We sincerely thank our distinguished keynote speaker, Mrs. Mosun Bello Olusoga, the former chairperson of Access Bank PLC and principal consultant and program director of KRC Limited, a lady of many firsts and many parts. Our eminent panelists, where can I start? From Professor Fabian Ajogu, SAN, principal partner of Kenna Partners, Mrs. Yemisi Ayani, an Amazon in her own right, chairperson of NASCON Allied Industries Limited, and Mr. Segun Oluketuyi, former group managing director, CEO of Wema Bank and chair of Chams Switch. And the DG has already said a lot about our speakers, and we'll be hearing a lot more about them very shortly. The committee's selection of these distinguished panelists was deliberate as we sought out ethical leaders, respected corporate titans, and with meritorious track records of service and distinction in Nigeria and as directors and managers of organizations. As you know, the theme of today's webinar is the role of directors in fostering ethical behavior and compliance in the workplace. We recognize the power and influence of leaders at the helm in setting the tone at the top and driving good governance and ethical behavior. To be successful, for any organization to be successful, the leadership must be fully committed to ethics and must walk the talk. Because a company's good reputation is so valuable, the standards of behavior must go beyond mere compliance with the law to concern for the environment, sustainability, and governance. The culture of organizations has been extensively discussed and researched as attention to corporate ethics and ESG is increasingly a core feature of boardroom agendas in a volatile, fast-changing digital world. To build an ethical and socially responsible society that benefits all stakeholders, organizations must actively and effectively manage ethics. It can no longer be a tick in the box. Ethics pays, and ethical behavior is good for business and good for society. Our distinguished speakers will, during this webinar, share their very rich experience and their perspectives on the subject and answer, hopefully, key questions that are top of mind for directors on this platform. Questions such as, is setting the right ethical tone in the boardroom sufficient to institute ethics in the organization? What new practical strategies should directors consider and adopt to foster ethical leadership in the workplace? How useful are independent ethics risk assessments? What governance structures and ethics risk management frameworks should boards put in place? How do we as board members encourage more focused attention on non-financial performance indicators in setting executive performance scorecards that drive behavior? How should ethical dilemmas be addressed and resolved, and much, much more? No longer is the test for whether it is legal or allowed sufficient to determine whether our business models are ethical. As directors and leaders of organizations, we should be held to a higher standard. We should serve as ethical role models and champion and sponsor ethical conduct as we fulfill our fiduciary and statutory responsibilities as directors. Our distinguished speakers will provide guidance in these areas today. Social media is also driving and demanding transparency and accountability in ways never seen before. The digital disruption is also increasing the speed with which boards are facing and navigating ethical and governance issues. As an institute and in line with our ethos to be the leading voice on corporate governance and business ethics in Nigeria, the Institute of Directors Code of Ethics, as described by the DG, was launched last year. The code aims to become a standard that all institutions, government bodies, organizations, and other entities look up to as a reference document or guide to formulate their codes of ethics or business conduct. Boards should therefore ensure that a code of ethics or conduct that defines clear boundaries and principles are developed, stipulating the ethical values or standards, as well as more specific guidelines for internal and external stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing my remarks, permit me to again express my sincere gratitude to Madam President and members of the Governing Council and Executive Committee for their untiring support. I also wish to thank my colleagues in the Ethics Committee and the management and staff of the Secretariat for their dedication, commitment, and support to bring us to this webinar this morning. I warmly welcome you once again to this webinar and wish all of us fruitful deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Amina Oyabola, Fellow of the Institute, for the welcome remarks. It's now time for me to invite our chief host, the President and Chairman of the Governing Council of the Institute of Directors, Nigeria, for our address. Madam President.
Thank you very much, DG. Our distinguished keynote speaker, panelists, and moderator, members of the Governing Council and Executive Committee of the Institute here present, esteemed fellows and members of the Institute, distinguished attendees, gentlemen of the media, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Governing Council of the Institute of Directors, I join the Chairman of the Ethics Committee of IOD, Mrs. Amina Oyabola, FIOD, to welcome you to this edition of our 2021 webinar series with the theme, The Role of Directors in Fostering Ethical Behavior and Compliance in the Workplace. This would be the first in the series of the enlightenment programs planned by the Institute to carry out a nationwide engagement with stakeholders of the IOD. And you know, we launched the IOD launched the Iod Code of Ethics last year. I am glad, therefore, that our Ethics Committee has lived up to the expectations of the Governing Council by organizing this webinar. This is part of our engagements with directors and other stakeholders in our quest to entrench ethical behavior in our personal and business lives as leaders of organizations. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, there is no doubt that much has been said and written about the role and duty of directors in setting the tone for values and ethical behavior in organizations. The board is responsible for determining, articulating, and communicating the values and standards of the business, and for ensuring that policies and controls put in place act to support rather than hinder ethical behavior in our organizations. There are, however, concerns regarding boards, how boards demonstrate commitment to ethical practices and standards, especially in the way they govern and conduct themselves. A lot of attention is now being placed on corporate ethics as a core feature of the boardroom agenda, since the costs and consequences of poor ethical practices by directors negatively impact corporate performance and sustainability. Even though ethics and values can be described as intangible, yet they must be presented to staff and stakeholders of an organization in a tangible way to solicit their buy-in. By so doing, we ensure that it becomes part of the DNA of the company. The board must be forward-looking and proactive in its approach to keep the level of discipline that is comparable to best practices in the oversight of risks in organizations. This is where the code of conduct comes in. They provide a framework for building ethical values. In effect, code of ethics are written to guide behavior. in the final analysis, the impact of the code must include how well it affects behavior. I can give some instances of how this works in practice. For instance, when everyone clearly knows the ethical standards of an organization, they are more likely to recognize wrongdoings and do something about it. Secondly, corrupt individuals believe that they are more likely to get caught in environments that emphasize ethical behavior. The Code of Conduct provides guidance in difficult and unclear situations. It's not every situation that is very clear. So, but when we have this Code of Conduct in place, it serves as guidance to all of us in terms of clarity. This is why IOD Nigeria has considered it necessary to host this event and bring together stakeholders and especially distinguished panelists as we have assembled today, so that we can have a conversation on the roles that directors need to play in fostering ethical behavior, since we all share the same vision of building and sustaining our organizations and our nation. Contemporary social psychological research also strongly suggests that codes can guide or induce behaviors. For instance, when temptations are significant, when the sacrifice of interests are high, when social consequences of violation or harm to others are low, under such circumstances, it is easy to be led from doing what you ought to do. Our expectation is that at the end of this webinar, the Institute will work with teams of relevant stakeholders to address the resolutions that arise from this event. Without taking so much time in setting the stage, I welcome again our distinguished keynote speaker, Mrs. Moshu Bello Olusoga, former chairman of Access Bank PLC and principal consultant or program director of KRC Limited. He has left solid track records that we are all proud of. Also welcome our panelists, a well-known expert in corporate governance, Professor Fabian Ajogo, SAN, principal partner, Kenna Partners. Mrs. Yemisi Ayeni, chairperson, NASCON Allied Industries Limited. And Mrs. Shegu Oloketuye, former GMD or CEO, Wema Bank PLC. As our chairman of Ethics Committee has said, these individuals have been carefully selected. Selected not only for expertise, but also for ethics, which we are all gathered for today. I can't leave the chairman of our Ethics Committee and Mrs. Amina Oyabola, a member of our Governing Council. So this team of experts in their various endeavors brings to us today their wealth of knowledge and decades of experience. And I'm indeed very proud to welcome all of you, as I am very confident that they would contribute meaningfully to the discourse. I can only ask our distinguished attendees to participate actively in this webinar and take advantage of the enormous wealth of experience on this webinar platform today. Thanks to the chairman and members of the Ethics Committee of IOD Nigeria, as well as the management of the IOD Secretariat for organizing this wonderful and timely event. I thank you all for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you very much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's now my pleasure to hand over to the moderator and our host of today, Mrs. Amina Oyagbola. Thank you very much, Madam.
Thank you very much, DG. Thank you, Madam President, for those fantastic remarks and setting the stage so beautifully. So we're going to dive right into the conversation, which is the reason why we're here. And I have the distinct honor and pleasure and privilege to invite, our keynote speaker, none other than Mrs. Mosun Bello Olusoga. I'll just spend 1 minute to briefly describe her in case you don't know enough. I'm sure you know her, but you may not know a little bit about her background. As I said earlier, that I call her Auntie Mo. Auntie Mo has a record of firsts. She was the first female executive director of Guarantee Trust Bank, the first female director of Access Bank, the first female director of Premium Pensions Limited, first African director, Global Alliance for Women in Banking, first female chairperson of Access Bank, and first female pro-chancellor and chairman of council of Olabisi Onabanjo University. During her tenure as chairman, Access Bank recorded unprecedented growth in key parameters, which has seen it emerge as Nigeria's #1 bank in several key indices and Africa's largest bank by customer size. She is also the current co-chair of the Nigeria chapter of Women Corporate Directors. Auntie Mo, Mrs. Olusoga, Bello Olusoga, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm really flattered when I hear all those things. I say, who? Okay, but God is merciful. So my respects goes to the president of IOD, Dr. Mrs. Chidinma. And thank you very much for my wonderful sister for inviting me. I pay my respects to the panelists and all members of the Institute of Directors. It's my pleasure to be here this morning. And I'll just like to share my slides with you. I'll just quickly go through the slides, but I think the beauty of this webinar will be during the discussion. There's truly not a lot that people don't know about ethics, so I won't dwell too much. I think we'll gain more when we're during the discussion. So briefly, I'll just go through talking about the conceptual definition of work ethics, how important it is, the difference between unethical behavior and crime, really some differences, and the role of directors in fostering ethics and compliance in the workplace, and what are the regulations that are put in place in workplace ethics and compliance. And I'll talk about the, just bring some extracts from different organizations as to their, how important they put ethics. And also I'll try to extract some highlights in the, from the Institute of Directors Code of Ethics. And also we'll talk briefly about the risks of non-establishment of workplace ethics and compliance structure. So I like coming with a basic understanding of what we mean by ethics. And as you all know, ethics is derived from the Greek word ethos, which means custom, habit, or character or disposition. So what are you disposed to doing? What is your character? How do you approach these things? And ethics is concerned with what is good, right, for individuals or societies. And it talks also about moral philosophy. And a moral philosophy or code of morals is practiced by a person or group of people. So generally, when we're talking about ethics, that is what we're talking about. You know, all of us know who Tyler Perry is, and he's obviously one of the better known American multi-million multi-million dollar producer, actor, screenwriter, performer, right? And he says that developing a good work ethics is key to success. Apply yourself at whatever you do, whether you are a janitor or taking your first summer job, because that work ethic will be reflected in everything you do in your life. I'll give the example of somebody that I thought had a very, very good ethic. So when we're in paid employment, for example, the way we handle other people's job is also how you're going to handle your job. And so applying yourself, and that is why I think for young people, we have to ensure that right from when they're starting to work, we make sure that they put some good work ethics, or they imbibe the culture of good work ethics. Now talking about conceptual definition for work ethics, workplace ethics, it's the moral code that guides the behavior of people, right, in an environment, and it's concerned with what is right or wrong. And when we're talking about ethics and compliance, so compliance is usually defined as being defined by law, regulations, or policies, and it's adherence to these policies or laws. And when you are complying, it is mandatory that you comply. And obviously, when you break the laws, then you have not complied with the law. However, on the other hand, ethics involves judgment and decision-making, which is reflected in your own values. And that, therefore, it's imperative that individuals develop proper values. And one thing that I think is missing from the society today is that our own values are, for lack of a better word, are not proper. So in the past, you know, people used to value good behavior, but now we don't place as much value. There are things that people play more value on, like fame, like money, rather than like good character. I like this quote from one of the more respected individuals in India, right? As in Premji is noted to be the Sir of Indian IT, right? And he says the way to business is from within, from poor ethical standards and lack of integrity that can do incalculable harm. History has proven repeatedly that business ethics, shared value, and corporate governance determine the longevity of of an enterprise or a business, right? So work ethic is the belief that work and diligence have a moral benefit and an inherent ability, virtue, or value to strengthen character and individual abilities. So when you have those values, your character is strengthened. It is a set of values centered, a value-centered approach to your own being, and it is important in the workplace, and it is manifested by the determination or the desire to work hard. So the core values of an institution must be reflected in your own code of conduct. So it is what you believe that is right that is transmitted to the whole organization. So talking briefly about the importance of ethics in building sustainable institutions. So increased accountability and transparency. So when everything is, you know, one of the things that I think is wrong with Nigeria is that we don't hold people accountable for bad behavior, for bad policies and things like that. And there's also the opaque way we're governing. So when you have an ethical organization, there is more accountability, more transparency in decision-making. There's increased trust and teamwork because everybody is working towards the same goal. And we know that once somebody says something, you can take it to the bank. It leads to increased productivity and profitability, reduced fraud, and protection of companies' assets, public image. Mrs. Oyegbela has talked about how ethics improves brands. And I'll talk a little bit about my experience when we're setting up Guaranteed Trust Bank. It also reduces reputational and legal risks. And obviously, when somebody is working in an environment that you know you have the same belief and the same values with, then there's obviously going to be increased staff morale. Now, there is usually what is ethical and what is law, right? In organization, you know, unethical conduct is a violation of moral conviction. However, we have to know that at times what is unethical might not be illegal, but what is illegal is always, more often than not, unethical. So, for example, in some parts of Europe, right, you might think it is unethical to be a prostitute, but it is not illegal, right? So yes, you can have something that is morally reprehensible, but it's not illegal. Let's talk about the case of Trump, right? What he did about avoiding tax, it's not illegal, but was it morally right for a multi-billionaire not to pay tax? So that is the issue. Recently, Pandora Papers came out, and it was discovered that Tony Blair neatly avoided paying stamp duties up to the tune of £312,000. Was it illegal? And he said he didn't do anything illegal. And people are asking, yes, it might not be legal because you structured the loan, you structured the purchase of the property through an offshore company. But as Prime Minister of a nation, was it morally right for you to have done such things, right? Obviously, when you're committing a crime, you're violating law and it is considered illegal. So we need to distinguish between what is legal and what is ethical. And there is usually the place where ethics and law there may be a blurring of the two. Now, how about the role of board in fostering ethics and compliance in the workplace? And I think the development of effective policies to strengthen the company's ethical framework and culture is very, very important. And this is through the policies that you put in place, be it in terms of whistleblowing, in terms of insider dealing, in terms of conflict of interest and things like that. So boards have to determine, Mrs. Oyegbela knows at MTN Foundation, right, that I sit on the board on, you have to declare whether you have interest in certain contracts or not. So it's all about transparency. It's all about people trusting you. So if you do have interest, say I have interest. And for board meetings, for where I was in GT, for example, if you have interest in a credit, you request yourself so that you give other board members the confidence to talk without you staring them in the face, and they can talk freely amongst themselves. So all these policies that you put in place ensures that the ethical framework is sound. It's also about formulation of effective systems to monitor compliance with these policies, establishment of a deterrent system to investigate and sanction breaches, and also the establishment of incentive culture to recognize and reward compliance. I'm a very firm believer in that what is not measured, right, you can't either sanction or reward it. So you have to put policies in place, but you also have to put monitoring activities to ensure either compliance, and where there is adherence. So there has to be a way to pat people on the back for doing more than what is necessary, or immediately sanctioning on ethical conduct. And in the good old days of GT, people have been known to be fired from the bank just from lying. You know, so there was an instance that when we started, we were very small, about less than 100 people. And we all trusted ourselves. So there was this instance that the operations guy was told to process something because Fola had signed, the MD had signed, and he hadn't. But because we trusted one another, and it was an open and transparent system, he processed it, only for him to discover that Fola hadn't signed. And Fola turned to the gentleman and said, "Did I sign this?" I said, "No, I was going to get your approval, but you told Tunde that I had signed." And he said, "Go and clear your table." And there and then, you know what is acceptable behavior and what is not acceptable behavior. So things have to be sanctioned or rewarded immediately. Right? Setting the tone at the top is very, very important, right? Because people look at what you do rather than what you say, right? So, for example, in there are certain situations in 2008. You know, the period that a lot of banks lost money, especially through the margin trading. So banks lost money, and that was where a lot of banks actually went under. And Access Bank said, "Look, for us to be a sustainable business, we need to cut costs, you know, we need to rationalize." And the MD said, "Okay, I will cut," and it's usually from the top, right from the top, the percentages the senior management take will be a lot more than this percentages the junior, and some junior people would not even suffer a loss in their salaries because it's already small. So you have to show right from the top. And when organizations say, "Okay, this is what is acceptable," for example, again, in the good old days of GT, I don't know if it still happens. On a yearly basis, we sign a code of conduct agreement and say, these are the things that the bank expects of you, and these are the things that we don't expect of you. So you cannot collect a gift from a customer. And where the customer insists, you have to submit that gift to the company secretary, and the company secretary would auction it. You have the latitude to bid, right? And the whatever amount is raised from the sale of the item is given to charity. So that is all about the transparency we're talking about. So the board also has to oversee implementation of companies' communication and dismissal, ensuring the integrity of financial reports. It's very embarrassing when at AGMs, people point loopholes or points inaccuracies in your financial statements. So the board is meant to ensure that the financial reports that are presented are as accurate as possible, and also establish the culture of integrity and legal compliance. One of the things banks would hate is when during your AGM, shareholders would note that, oh, you keep getting fined by CBN for non-compliance with some of the regulations, right? Be it your credit limit, be it not presenting your reports on time and things like that. So it is not in your best interest to pay fines. So the fines are not really the issue, because how much is 2 million, how much is 10 million, but it's the integrity of your financial reports. It's saying that you are not a careful person, right? That we can't trust what you have given us. So that is the major issue. And as I also said, it is very necessary to develop a code of ethics and business practices. So your organization has to, and I'm glad that IOD has done this. So directors, when they join IOD, they know what is acceptable behavior and what is not acceptable behavior in all ramifications. Sorry, I like quotes because I think people learn from quotes. Potter Stewart is an American journalist, and he's better known for his work with Discovery Channel. He has a program that he does, Dirty Jobs. And he says that ethics is knowing the difference between what you have a right to do and what is right to do. I might have a right to tell my housemaid to do unspeakable things because I've paid her salary, but is it the right thing to do? You might have okay, for example, doctors, for example, you might be within your legal right to turn away a patient because the patient cannot pay. But is it morally right to see somebody who is on their deathbed and you can't attend to the person because the person hasn't paid for the card and things like that? So we have to be careful. So for you to be an ethically sound person, you have to make the distinction between what you have the right to do and what is right to do. I've taken the liberty to look at the regulations of the Code of Corporate Governance or Code of Ethics for different institutions, but I will not go through them. So for example, Central Bank has its own Code of Corporate Ethics, right? So it says banks are to establish Code of Ethics, and in there you have to have your practices that are necessary to maintain confidence in the bank's integrity, the responsibility and accountability of individuals reporting and investigating on ethical practices, and banks are to adopt policies to guide the board in the view of unethical situations, right? So the Securities and Exchange Commission also has its Code of Corporate Governance for public companies. I'm sure for those of us that sit on PLCs, we've had to write exams, and these exams are just making sure that we understand our role as board members, with our main concern being with care, with the duty of care, and to make sure that we have our organizations are put in the best possible places. So I've quoted a lot of, but I want to talk more on the, the FRCN too, the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria Code of Corporate Governance also has its own. The board is required to formulate and review companies' code of business and ethics. The board should monitor adherence, and the Code of Business Conduct and Ethics should commit the company, the board, management, and other employees and relevant external parties standards of professional and ethical behavior, and should be designed with due consideration for the interests of the company, and should be sufficiently detailed to give clear guidance to its users. So they don't want anything that is opaque. They don't want anything that is debatable. So it has to be very, very concise and clear in simple language. And it has to also be formally communicated to persons. And that is why I like organizations who have the code of conduct, but also disseminate all this to all members of staff. So like I said, in duty, every year, each member of staff will sign. So you can't say, oh, I didn't know that this is not acceptable. So they say ignorance is no. So, okay, you also have the one for insurance company. I also checked the one for the MBA. The MBAs also have theirs. The NMA, the Medical Association, also have their very voluminous, you know, I found the one for the Nigerian Medical Association very, very detailed. So it's as minute as doctors cannot do advertisement. That you know, I found something very interesting, that you have the duty of care, so you have to do whatever you can do to save a person. However, if what you need to do is in conflict with the person's ethical or religious standing, for example, they gave the example of blood transfusion, and that particularly the Jehovah Witnesses do not get and they don't like to be transfused with blood. So you have to ensure that you get their sign of that, you know, that this blood transfusion is what will save me, but I don't want it. Right, so it's really, really very detailed. So all organizations have their own code of conduct. So these are the guidelines within which they would operate. And I like what my sister Amina was saying, that, you know, in terms of even social media, what are the things that you should post on social media? What are those things that are acceptable for you or not? And look at the individual himself and what the individual's values are compared to the organizational values. I say that organizations take on the character of the people who run them. So if somebody is an ethical person, it is likely that he runs an ethical organization. However, if his ethics or his values are incongruent to the organization, then you have a conflict. But the organizational ethics will always win. I say the personal ethic is the egg, the organizational ethic is the stone. So egg falls on stone, egg breaks. Stone falls on egg, egg breaks. So you have to ensure that your own ethical values align with the organizational values. And when you see that there is a major disparity, then perhaps it is time for you to exit yourself. I was training a bank at the time. Needless to say, the bank is no longer in existence. And I gave the example, supposing you go to a ministry and the minister or the accountant general or whatever says that, okay, how much is your deposit rate? And you said deposit rate 7%. And the man says, okay, they will take the 7%, but let's give the ministry 5% and you pay me 2%. It's still 7% to your bank. Would you do it? And the person, somebody answered and said, see, Auntie Mo, for me as a person, I know it is wrong, so I will not do it. However, if my superior hears that I declined deposit, right, I will be fired. So that means that this person's personal ethics is congruent with organizational ethics. And guess what? She had to lower her own personal ethics to be able to comply with the organization's ethics. So if she wasn't going to do that, she would have left the organization. And that is why some companies, when they want to recruit, they recruit people whose ethical values are incongruent with what their own organizational values are. So let me just quickly take some extracts from the Iod Code of Ethics. So it says members of the Institute are to maintain ethical standards in all their dealings. The members are to treat compliance with ethical standards as critical elements of their responsibilities. And Institute members who discover bribery or corruption activities are to report same immediately, right, through the channels provided, and they are to take necessary and reasonable steps to ensure that business judgments and decisions are made without interference or perceived personal interest. So they're supposed to do this with the best of integrity, with transparency, with best judgment, right, in the best interest of the organization without taking cognizance of their own personal interest. And it also says that members of the institute shall not misuse public or organization funds for private or personal gain, and they shall not exhibit behaviors that deviate from civic virtue. You know, at times, we do things that we don't even know that is not ethical. We work in organizations, and, you know, I've seen instances where people make photocopies of books, right? You don't think it's stealing, but truly it is not ethical that you're using the resources unless you have gotten permission from the organization that I would like to do this. Is it allowed? But truly, a lot of us use the organization's resources for our own personal use. And rounding up, I'd like to talk about another quote from Micro. Okay, so Micro says that work ethics is important because unlike intelligence, athleticism, charisma, or any other natural attribute, it is a choice, right? So it depends on what you want to do. So we're talking about integrity, we're talking about principles, moral, value, honesty, right or wrong, fairness, responsibility, conscience, honor. It is all about you choosing to do the right thing, right? In Guarantee Trust Bank, sorry, I keep going back to Guarantee Trust Bank because I was a pioneer staff and I worked there for a long time. And one of the things that we said when we were going to do, when we started, is that we will do things right, because we know that when you do things right, at the ultimate, things will become right, and you make money. You can make money by doing things right. So on we were, Plural House is on Oyinjolayemi, and Oyinjolayemi is one way. And because we are almost at the end of the road, so people had the tendency to face one way to quickly come to the bank. And it was decided, if any member of staff takes the one way and say, okay, it's just the car park, I'm just going to do a quick U-turn and enter the bank, you will be fired, right? So things that you should not do, right? It is a matter of personal choice, but the organization also has to either sanction or reward good or improper behavior. So talking about the risk of non-establishment of workplace, so you know, you face reputational or legal risk, loss of business opportunities, because what we discovered, you know, when we started, a lot of banks will give what you call it facilitation, call it brokerage, whatever, for deposits. And Guarantee Trust Bank, at Guarantee Trust Bank, we decided that we were not going to do any form of gratis to take deposits. So it was very, very difficult for us initially. And we said, look, instead of giving us the 2 billion, because we won't give you any brokerage, so give us the 200 million for what we bring to the table, for the product that we're going to do to you, for you, and things like that. And, you know, it was it could have been easier to just give the brokerage and collected the money. But we said, no, we are going to use our intelligence to work and succeed. Was it difficult? It was very, very difficult, but it made us very, very creative and very, very hardworking in making sure that we understood what the businesses wanted to achieve. And so when the organizations would give the banks that will give them brokerage, they will still include GT because they needed an organization that was credible as part of their bankers. And more, we now discovered that some international firms had a list of banks they will deal with because of their ethical stance. And gradually, Guaranteed Trust Bank had started having the foothold and started having. And at the end of the day, is Guaranteed Trust Bank profitable? Yes. Is it difficult? It is difficult, especially in an environment where you see people doing the wrong things. So it takes the confidence in your own ability and the confidence in your own ability and the commitment to do what is right at every point in time. And, you know, staff morale and people are usually very proud of the kind of institution they work in. So the threat of being a going concern is minimized, and there's reduced, if you have an ethical organization, obviously there will be reduced staff attrition. And if you don't do it, people who are ethical will not want to do business with you. So your suppliers will not want to do business with you. And there will be some suppliers who will not want to do business with you. And there will be some individuals who will not want to work with you. So essentially for me, as an individual, space. And I think even as society at large, if we had more ethical people, a lot of things will be more transparent. Then people will be accountable for their deeds or misdeeds. And I think the whole nation will be better. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Auntie Mo.
Thank you.
That was amazing. I don't even know how you managed it. You've packed in so much in such a short time, and you have covered the field in such a rich way. We've all, no doubt, taken several nuggets from your rich experience and from the fantastic content in your presentation. We're going to dive straight into tease out some of the issues that our keynote speaker, has presented to us in the past 30 minutes or so. And I'm going to, move very quickly because of time to Professor Fabian Ajogu, SAN. We all know Fabian doesn't need introduction. He's a learned SAN. He's a thought leader in corporate governance and ethics. And he's also an author of several books, but I'm particularly interested in the book that he co-authored on outcomes-based governance with Mervyn King, who is the guru of corporate governance. And Professor Ajogu has also contributed, as we know, significantly in the corporate governance arena in Nigeria as a fellow and director of the Society for Corporate Governance in Nigeria. He has also contributed to a lot of the codes that our keynote speaker referred to in her presentation, in the development of several of those governance codes. And due to time, I will not list them, but it also includes the Code of Corporate Governance for Nigeria 2018. And so, Prof, my brother, my prof, my learned self, my friend, I'm going to ask you a few questions that you can help us gain more insights and more knowledge, more awareness on this very interesting subject of ethics. And I want to start with, and I think Atimo talked about the importance of setting the tone and the importance of leadership. Why, Prof, is leadership commitment so very important? And what governance structures should boards put in place to try and institutionalize ethics? The keynote speaker gave a lot of practical examples which we can all identify with. So what can we do to institutionalize ethics? Thank you.
Thank you very much, the chairperson of the committee, and very well respected Kabola. I enjoyed listening to Mrs. Bello Shoga, the keynote speaker, that I just suddenly said, all of a sudden it ended. I was enjoying listening. I forgot that I was meant to intervene at some point. So from a
Sorry, sir,
practical...
I was given 15 minutes, so I had to cut it.
Yes, it's excellent presentation, and more importantly, not speaking pure definitions, but putting real life perspectives so that at least the audience can connect with some of those stories and the person. My point of connect is really when you talk about leadership, say that leadership sets the tone, and both actual tone and body language. And that distinction is to distinguish between a code. The company may have a code, but what it practices is different. It may waive its code, it may point you to the plaque at the reception, but the actual practice is different. And in listening to the keynote speaker, we could see a marriage, a fusion of some of those principles with actual practice. With the gentleman he referred to, Mr. Adiola, I try to do things well. And over time, it paid. And so my contribution to the question you raised is actually to look at the competing effectively with ethics and what the leadership does in that regard. So the board is vested with actual authority to manage the business of the company. That is law. As old school now, will say the old section 63 of CAMA. My younger colleagues will know the new section. But more importantly,
the world we're in. Sorry, Fabian, we lost you for a second. You froze, so maybe just take a step back. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about it. I said when we talk about leadership, the board is vested with the authority to manage the affairs of a company under CAMA, that comes in Allied Matters Act. But they're also custodians of ethics, values, and compliance. That is embedded in the first principle of the National Code of Corporate Governance, which is a responsibility for the board. So to answer your question, that is vested in the board. When you look at it, I take from a point that the keynote speaker made about law and ethics. I would just like to say law and ethics are inextricably tied by loosely connected yet solid strings. It is a clear recognition of the link between the two that forms the basis for a good company, a good business environment, and a good society. So it goes beyond, and those linkages, we can backtrack, find them in law and religion, economics, politics, but they hem in to define the right way to do things and the good way to do things. And that is vested squarely on the board, who then trickles it down to management and to the rest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ajogu, for those fantastic insights. I'm now going to move very quickly to Mrs. Yemisi Ayeni, another female Amazon who I have a lot of respect for, the former and first female director of SNEPCO, and the former managing director of Shell Closed Pension Fund, and now chairperson of NASCON, and also a non-executive director of Guinness PLC, and many, many, many more. There's so many accomplishments. Yemisi, I would like you to share your wealth of experience and insight, given what you've already heard. And I think, there's so many areas in which you can give us perspective. But I think one of the areas that many directors and leaders, on boards are challenged with what a subject we call ethical dilemmas. We all struggle with them. And I think our keynote speaker, touched on a classic example of that in the course of her presentation. How, in your opinion, should ethical dilemmas be addressed? For the purpose of our participants, what are the red flags and practical resources and actions that perhaps directors can take to resolve ethical dilemmas, to foster ethical behavior in organizations? Thank you. Have we lost her? Oh dear. Well, this does happen with technology. Whilst we are waiting for Yemisi to come back so that we don't lose time, I will just move very quickly to Mr. Segun Oloketuye, who is with us here. And he needs no introduction. He is the former group managing director and CEO of Wema Bank. He's also the chairman of Chams Switch, and also the on the board of Greenwich Merchant Bank and CBC Infrastructure. Mr. Oluketuyi, your experience and the outcomes you achieved during your tenure in Wema Bank precede you, and they indeed highlight, the critical role of directors in fostering ethical leadership and the huge difference that leadership can make in terms of turning around an institution and the performance of an organization. So, your leadership in Wema Bank really is a case study. And it's one of the cases I have to tell you that, the Institute of Directors itself has, analyzed as an illustrative example of positive ethics stories. So our question for you really is, how did you do it? How did you turn around the fortunes of Wema Bank? And what are the key learning points and key takeaways for directors that you can share with us? Thank you.
Thank you, Amina, and thank you. Thanks to the Institute for inviting me again. Thank you very much. Some caveat before I dive into this. I'm going to talk and I give my practical example. Tell you my experience at Wema, but I'm saying this with all due respect to my predecessors in office. I'm not sitting here in judgment of anyone, but then it's important that we share knowledge and share experience so it could instruct, we could all benefit from that. And I think that's why I was called upon to share my experience. Without any doubt, I took over a distressed bank to manage, a failed bank. And I was, let me give context to that description of Wema. Wema, when I got into Wema, I took over a bank where shareholders' funds were in negative of 66 billion. This was June 2009. Sitting in the bank, everything you call corporate governance, ethics, compliance had collapsed. The bank was just barely breathing. What were the consequences? The result of all of those, we have dissatisfied workforce. Staff were just marking their time, probably dusting their CV looking for the next place to go. Everything was overwhelming, let me put it that way. And then where to start? We had to, one way, when you're in a situation like this, the default thinking is to do anything and do everything to survive. And doing anything and doing everything to survive could mean doing what we're dealing with here today, being unethical in the way you go about your business. Antimo mentioned a particular case, and I will reference that immediately. We had no liquidity. Central Bank was the one clearing our checks for us at the clearing house. They graciously provided us with an overdraft to clear checks. And so one biggest issue, liquidity is the lifeline of banks, is to start looking for deposit. And here we were, one of my officers went out and got a huge public sector deposit. And, she came and said, this is the split between the organization and the officers. And I said to her, sorry, we won't take it, but can I speak to these individuals? Maybe I'll be able to make a case. Of course, she said it's not necessary because this individual would not agree. And I told her, please return the money. And the whole bank couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe that we were looking for money, and I said, return the money. And this guy is not just the fact that what you're doing is unethical, it's also the grade, where 7% is being split to 2% for the institution and 5% for yourself. And I said, sorry, I won't touch it. So that's just to paint a picture of the bank that we were dealing with. Generally speaking, Wema was bleeding. So default, like I said, would be just do anything. But then we decided we should approach this by signaling to the institution, to the entire workforce and to stakeholders that we can resuscitate this bank, but by doing the right thing. I remember immediately the new board that was inaugurated. My then chairman called me and he said, Shegun, please, I need to have a word with you. He said, in my entire life of working, I've never stepped into a police station to answer to any case. And I don't want this institution to stain that image, to taint that reputation, and he would never want to go to a police station. He then asked, Shegun, do I have your assurance that that will not happen? I said, sir, that makes both of us. I also haven't stepped into a police station, save for traffic offense, police impounding your car and all of that. But to answer to fraud, to answer to whatever, never in my life. And I also said, I also have taken the decision, in spite of that situation, that I will not go to answer to any call at the police station on account of unethical practices, malfeasance, fraud, and all that. And the man shook my hand and he said, now I can sit on the board. And really, that meeting said it took for the bank we really wanted to run. Now, before I came to Wema, I had a stint with another bank just shortly before, I would like to keep the name. Shortly before the consolidation in 2006, I was acting managing director in this bank. CBN had sent leadership away for so many issues. When I got into that bank, I learned one lesson very quickly. And the lesson was how not to run a bank or how not to run an institution for that matter. If I didn't learn anything technical, I learned that. One of the staff was going to leave. And this was a situation when we needed to hold this bank so that we could pack them into a consolidation team. And then the staff was leaving. So I asked to have an audience with her. So she came. I said, so why do you want to leave? Is it because you think we're not going to make it to this bank where we wanted to merge and all of that? He said, no. I came to this bank, all the values in the word, ethics, everything was preached to me. And all of us respected leadership. And suddenly we heard that leadership had done some things. I was in the media anyway. And Settlement had to come in and they fired the entire leadership of that bank. So the lady said to me, every day I wake up to come to work, I'm in distress. I feel used. How could leadership do this to us? And she said, just to get my sanity, I beg, I need to leave. I'm not going anywhere to work. I just want to go and cool off. So coming from that background and coming to what I saw in Wema, I knew we had to do something differently. And so first was to set up all the structures that we need in governance, in all the policies that will guide our operation. That was set up. It was like we said to ourselves, it was almost a 70-year-old institution when I came in, but then we decided to run the bank as a new bank, where all the things you need to do were being, reworked, coming out fresh. That was what we did. And then we set up one particular tool that we use, and I will encourage a lot of us to go, and if we're paying lip service to that, we need to do it well. It's called Whistleblowing Policy, and we set up the whistleblowing framework. Honestly, we benefited greatly. So what I found out is that typically human beings we're good people. We also want to work in good institution. We want to achieve. I found out that the staff really were good staff who were not properly guided and properly led. So when we set up the whistleblowing policy in the bank, this was just to let us know what was going on. A lot of things came up. And of course, we protected the identity of those who gave information. In a particular branch, we had to fire the entire staff, and I mean everybody. Because they set up a scheme when the bank was in distress, couldn't lend, and they started lending money to bank's customers. It wasn't as if that was not bad enough. So they were making contribution to lend to bank's customer. When they ran out of their contribution, they went into the vault and they do what they call vault lending. For those who are bankers, you write your check, you put the check in the vault, and they give you cash. And a lot of them will go in there on a daily basis. They write their check and they collect cash, and they were lending the cash to customer. One person blew the whistle, and we went in there, investigated, and we found out that it was true. The entire workforce in that branch was asked to leave. I know I can relate to a whole lot of policies, a whole lot of principles about ethics, about compliance. Antimo shared quite a bit of them. One, I believe, it has to be values-driven, value approach to ethics and value approach to compliance as against rules-based. However, a time comes where you have to just put down your foot and enforce rules where you see clear case of fraud, clear case of malfeasance in the institution. So that was a picture of the whether without wanting to bore you because you asked the question, how did we turn around the back? However, quick lessons that I learned in this whole process. Like I said, number one lesson was I learned how not to run a bank or any institution for that matter. And I learned that the collapse of any organization is imminent when leaders lead for their own interest as against for the interest of the institution. And there's a cost to ethical behavior and compliance, cost in quotes. And what is this cost? It is delayed gratification. But once the benefits of your diligent work and ethical behavior start to roll in, they guarantee you sustainable performance. And that is what we saw in WEMA. Today, WEMA is growing steadily. We've rebuilt an institution to an enviable, to a respectable, I would say, position in the market today. Number four, I would say, lead by doing and not by saying alone. She also mentioned the issue of set the tone from the top. Someone says, you lead it, you live it, and people watch what you do.
Thank you so much.
Respect your rules. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We could spend all day listening to you. I mean, I think we should have a session where we debrief your experience in WEMA Bank. Thank you so much. I have to come back now very quickly to Yemisi Ayani, who at the nick of time, just at the point when we wanted to bring you on, was cut off by technology. So, but we're back now, gladly. And I was just asking you the question, Yemisi, after introducing you, how should ethical dilemmas be addressed? I mean, the previous speakers have touched on the subject, and we just wanted you to help us and the participants here to highlight what are the red flags and practical resources and key actions that directors can take to resolve these ethical dilemmas and foster ethical behavior? Because the temptations are real and the tensions are there. They will always be there. Thank you.
Many thanks. Sorry I was cut off earlier, as you say, the technology devil. Many thanks to the Ethics Committee at the IOD for inviting me to be part of what is a hugely important conversation, and to the previous speakers for starting off the discussion so well. Indeed, that's a great question, Amina. I'm going to start by being somewhat provocative and saying that many situations we tag as ethical dilemmas in Nigeria are really not ethical dilemmas at all. And to explain this, I'll define what an ethical dilemma is. It is a situation in which a difficult choice has to be made between two courses of action, either of which entails transgressing a moral principle. And the last part of the definition is a key determinant of whether or not a situation is an ethical dilemma. So it's not so much the existence of different courses of action that we're trying to choose between, that sort of normal life. That doesn't in itself constitute a dilemma. It only becomes a dilemma if choosing either course of action will mean transgressing a moral principle. So I'll give a really stark example. Imagine there's only one doctor in a remote outpost, and he's faced with the choice of leaving his outpost to return home to save his father's life. His father is unwell, and then he leaves the community that doesn't have any other doctor, or he follows his sense of duty, remains at his duty post, and he leaves his father with no medical support. Now, this example I've used because I think it helps us distinguish between what's a genuine ethical dilemma and other situations where there's really only one moral course of action. And the alternative course or courses of actions might well be expedient. And I saw a question speaking to that in the Q&A. You know, what happens if your business is about to fall, because you are not doing things unethically? So that's expedient, but it's not typically the moral option. And I think this choice between the moral course of action and the expedient course of action is actually the more common situation we face when operating in business in Nigeria today. I'll just give a few quick examples to try and illustrate this. So one that I think many people face every day, the choice between paying bribe to a government agency, for example, and as a result, you receive timely services, and then you can meet your business targets, or you don't pay a bribe. You will eventually get the service, but you will face interminable delays. And what do those delays mean? It means that you miss your business targets. It means if you are the individual running the process, your performance against your peers looks so much worse because perhaps they've gone ahead to pay the bribe using facilitation agents, etc., and they've been able to deliver on time. So I think we can all agree on this call that the legal moral choice is always not to pay the bribe. And this is where I think we really come into our own as directors. We have to ensure that the business targets we set our staff do not have built-in expectations that they can only meet by engaging in unethical behavior. We can't, on the one hand, have very pretty codes of business conduct that state we won't pay bribes or facilitation payments. And on the other hand, we set targets that we know, or we should know, if we understand the business terrain in which we're operating in, simply cannot be met without paying bribes or facilitation payments. This is sheer hypocrisy. In itself, setting such targets is unethical and certainly not what is expected of us as directors. I think the time has come when we need to move from tackling these kind of systemic issues, and they are systemic issues, as individual companies trying to do it in silos. And we have to start to leverage the strength of our industry groups and agree industry-wide codes of business conduct. Now, not just agree them, but agree that we all adhere to them. Today, we use these industry groups when we want to influence government. Say if there's been a punitive tax hike, we all get together and we go to Ministry of Finance and we do really good papers to show why that shouldn't be the case. But we need to go beyond that. So, imagine a scenario where all the players in a particular industry say, agree that, we're going to conduct business ethically, whether it's paying corporate taxes as and when due, dealing with government agencies without using brown envelopes, because the point is if none of us are using brown envelopes, then we're all going to face the same delays, and that kind of levels the playing field. Where the distortion comes is where some do and some don't. And so this moves the industry to a situation where each of us, our competitive edge is based on the quality of the work we do and not on the unethical behavior that allows some companies to undercut their competitors on price because they're doing things in the wrong way. Now, you might think I'm describing utopia, but I actually think I'm describing an attainable situation that webinars such as this can help create. organizations such as IOD can help foster. I actually believe in Nigeria that those of us in our 50s and 60s are critical in creating this change. I don't have the stats and I couldn't find them anywhere. But based on the boards I serve on, I think probably easily 90% of the directors in corporate Nigeria are in this age bracket. So this isn't a pipe dream that we should be waiting for others to do. This is for us to do. We are the ones on those boards. We're the ones making the decisions. We're the ones driving the strategy. We're the ones setting the targets. We're the ones to set the ethical tone. And really, there is no better time. We all just need to agree that we want a different business ethos that includes us all operating and completing ethically. There are also some more nuanced examples, such as undeclared conflicts of interest. You know, every time we give a contract to a connected party and we don't declare the conflict, we behave unethically. The justification for not declaring usually goes along the line of, oh, my judgment isn't impaired as a result of that business doing that company doing that particular business with my company. But as clearly set out, I was looking at the Iod Code of Ethics. There are different types of conflicts of interest. There's actual, there's potential, there's perceived. They require different treatment. And actually the determination of whether a situation is a conflict, what type of conflict it is and how best to treat it isn't a decision for the conflicted party to make. That's why conflicts have to be declared. So an impartial body can consider the facts and rule on it. You know, every time we don't employ the most qualified person and instead we employ someone else either as a favor to a big man or because the person is from our village or from our church or from our mosque, we behave unethically. Every time we go under the table and obtain confidential price sensitive information about our competitors and use it to gain a competitive edge, we behave unethically, and the list goes on. So I will just close quickly by saying 4 things I think we can do to foster ethical behavior. First of all, I've already spoken about the need to implement and adhere to, more importantly, industry-wide codes of business conduct. And then I think as the second thing, as directors, we must not be hypocritical. You know, when we say one thing and we do something else, we actually are not able to create a corporate environment where these issues can be openly discussed. These discussions will only happen if staff believe that we sincerely want the company to operate ethically. As directors, are we saying one thing and doing something else? You know, we have smart staff. It takes more than plastering the office walls with posters to foster an ethical culture. We must walk the talk and be seen to be doing so. Just a personal example, I remember once sitting in a boardroom, this many years ago, and I was insisting on an ethical course of action, and a more senior colleague turned around and really attacked me and said I was trying to hold the company to my personal moral standards. It was great to be able to point the person to the posters that were actually in the meeting room that we were sitting in. And I said, well, actually, you know, I'm just going by what the posters say. What I'm saying is fully supported by all these posters. I think that's the stone that Auntie Mo referred to earlier. And we also have to deal decisively with unethical behavior when it occurs. We have to do away with the days when the openly corrupt product manager is seen as a star in the organization because he delivers. The way in which delivery happens must be genuinely viewed as just as important as the content of what is delivered. The end must no longer be allowed to justify the means. And finally, I think we need to recruit carefully. We must, in our recruitment process, know that people having a clear ethical compass is important to us. You know, we have to do this carefully. Obviously, if you sit in an interview and ask somebody, will you pay a bribe? They will turn around and say, oh, no, of course I wouldn't, never. But I think there are more subtle questions that can identify where people stand on the ethical landscape. And, you know, using culturally relevant scenarios. And I think it's funny, this question I have, Auntie Mo alluded to it already. So is it okay to print the materials for your resident association meeting or your church or your mosque service on the office printer? Is it okay to share copyrighted music with a friend? Is it okay to use someone else's funds to demonstrate your personal financial capability for a visa interview? You know, your budgets are tight, you procure some business services, the vendor forgets to invoice you. 6 months go by. Do you remind them to send the invoice? So I will close by saying that as we ask these questions when interviewing potential staff, I think we should all ask ourselves the same questions. And we need to answer them honestly for us to foster an ethical culture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, for those amazing insights on ethical dilemmas, and it's a very difficult topic, which you have broken down for us in a digestible manner, easy for all of us to relate to and to understand. Well, time is fast spent, but what I want to do is the final round of questions for the panelists before we throw the floor open for our participants to engage. And so I would just like to urge our panelists to keep their responses very short. If you can respond within 3 to 5 minutes, that would be absolutely great, so that we can open the floor to our panelists. So I'm coming back now to Professor Ajogu. We must draw from your wealth of experience on this subject matter, Fabian. So my question to you is, what are the best practice trends in corporate governance and ethics today, and what reporting structures should the board put in place for effective governance of ethics risks? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think a lot was put forward by Ms. Sayeni on those very insightful comments. Today, the trends would be ES on the table, environmental, social, and governance. They encompass sustainability principles, corporate social responsibility, and the way of a responsible company, which puts together your growth, your responsibilities to the different stakeholders that you have: shareholders, employees, society, Lord Caesar takes your taxes, and all of those people. That is the way to ensure that you are going to be celebrated as those 100 companies that 100 years companies get and celebrate. The next point in terms of that is, and these are points taken from King and I's book on outcomes-based governance. We should look at outcome rather than I have complied, I've ticked all the boxes, I didn't do this and I didn't do that. So diversity, next thing. Powerful boards that will endure will be those that are diverse both in skill set, gender, experience, outlook, temperament, and where they're from. You need to have a solid, robust board. Like some families, they've got different people in different fields, and together they form a solid family. The other thing will be stakeholder engagement. If you lose the people who matter, then you lose everything. And sometimes the people who matter are not the obvious shareholders. By no means they are very significant stakeholders. But the people who can go on social media and undo everything that you have done and get a run against you are important to be taken along. And responsible companies marry the ethics of their practices and the governance of what it. But just 2 points I'd like to wrap up with is, so there is this thing about, as Sayeni said, and I take from that point, it is difficult to just tell people, abide by your moral values alone, fight ethics, ethical dilemmas, because you may truly, truly be in companies where things are difficult to live out your personal values. There are those who argue that, yes, the company is ethical today, but they've just done like the Italian mob. They started out dirty and they've gone clean. They've gone legit. I knew when they did this. So it's important to help firm members, company members, to live out the ethics by going with what Professor Robert Kliger had put forward, and we discussed it a lot in the past. That formula, corruption equals monopoly plus discretion minus accountability. Now, if you want to disrupt corruption in a company, you need to disrupt this formula. You need to remove decision-making vested in the monopoly of 1 or 2 people alone. So when you have a procurement committee, when you have a diversely made up procurement committee, you will need to get all of them corrupt at the same time, and it's not always easy. When you vest discretion in people, you make it prone to corruption. When you remove discretion and publish the criteria, once this happens, you must award. Once this is not there, you must deny. Then you reduce corruption. We have all kinds of illustrations. We had the issues of monopoly with NITEL being split up, and nobody needs to pay anybody any more bribe to get your line not to be on toss. Younger people will know what toss means. Now, you include accountability. So in accountability, you have to explain out all of those. And Lagos State bears that illustration with land assessments. Because now you don't need to pay any land valuer to value you downwards, just a square meter times the fixed rate. That's the figure. These things help people who are in a company to lead good lives because you help them not to survive corruption and ethical issues only by the strength of their own moral conviction. And I'm not saying that's not important, but we can create an enabling environment. Let me round up by saying that someone gave me a mortgage for the building where I am now, my office. And he did it, now I know he did it under difficult times when his bank was going through difficulties. He gave me a 7-year mortgage, but out of belief that your honor should be to repay a loan. And I say this because it's part of ethics to not repay loans. And I tried to pay it in 2 years, which I did. And he didn't seem to like it. He wanted a longer term to earn more money. Thank you very much for that mortgage many years ago.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you very much indeed for those excellent insights and nuggets, practical steps that directors can take, to change the landscape inside, their organizations. And hopefully, if we have several private sector organizations doing that, we change the landscape in Nigeria ultimately, which is fantastic. I'm coming back to you, Mr. Segun Oluketuyi, and an interesting question for you, since you've worn the two hats. Is there a distinction between the role of the managing director and the role of the chair of a board in fostering ethical leadership? They're both directors. One is part of management and one is not. Thank you.
Thank you. Fabian, thank you for the compliment. Maybe the audience should know that Fabian was my teacher for ethics at Lagos Business School many years ago. The law sets out the role of directors, sets out the role of managing directors, and the various documents we run in our organization as code of conduct also set out what roles they play. The role of a chairman and the role of the MD are collaborative in ethics and compliance. The chair leads the oversight responsibility of the board, no doubt. It should ensure that the appropriate processes and tools are in place to execute, to implement those structures that have been put together to foster ethics and compliance in the organization. And to help the board, the chair, it's really today, most organizations will have chief compliance officer, they call it in banks, but it's been extended because of the importance of ethics. In some organizations, it's been extended to have further responsibility for monitoring ethical behavior in the institution. So today we have the role of chief ethics and compliance officers in some organizations. So, and they report directly to the board. The whole essence is what the board has set out in terms of ethics and compliance in policies, in procedures, in rules adhered to, and if there are breaches of those rules, somebody should report directly to the board. So you have the CECO as a role, as like the representative, the eye of the board within the organization, those who run the organization. On the other hand, the CEO leads the institution. The responsibility to execute, the responsibility to ensure that there are ethical behavior in terms of in the operation of the business of the company. There are compliance with rules. And when we say compliance, compliance could be even for rules and procedures that you have set up internally, not necessarily those given to you by regulators or compliance rules given to you by law, even those that you have set up yourself. So it's the role of the MD to ensure there's compliance, there is these rules are followed, are implemented. The CEO is double-hatted. The CEO sits on the board as a board member, but he then steps out, he also leads the management. So it is wearing two hats here. Wearing the hat of a director who has the same responsibility, the same expectation from him as a board member, is also in leadership, those who execute all the policies and procedures around ethics and compliance. So if you look at the two positions, the roles are complementary. The MD particularly has a major role to ensure that you properly represent the board in management, in execution. And he owes it to the board that those roles are properly executed and do not embarrass the board in any way. That's the way I would look at the role of the CEO and the chairman. Are they really, is there any distinction between them? There's clear decision by laws, by governance rules and all of that, but the two efforts, the two people have collaborative effort to ensure that the institution runs well on ethics and compliance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Olukote, for those fantastic insights. And I'm going to give Mrs. Yemisi Ayani the last word as our panelist before we open the floor to our distinguished participants. So just in rounding up this conversation from here, Yemisi, could you kindly, based on what you've heard so far, share with us how you think directors and leaders should be rethinking now their leadership role on the subject of ethics and governance? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. This question reminds me of a time many years ago when our younger daughter came to my office for some reason. She was probably about 6 at the time, and she sat watching me work for a while. I think I was reviewing various documents prepared by staff, and she said to me, "Mommy, all you do is correct other people's work. Don't you do any work of your own?" I think at 6 years old, she hit the nail on the head. As directors, our role is not to do the work ourselves. It is to lead and guide our teams as they do their work and to create a conducive environment that allows all to flourish and allows all to work, for them to work ethically. And I think this is a critical point, whether it's ethics, whether it's operational, we have to strike the balance as directors between being up there, watching from a distance with a superior and critical ear with a big stick, and the other extreme of being one of the players, where we're so busy on the pitch that we can no longer play our role as coach. I'm not a huge football fan, but the few games I've watched, I found myself more fascinated by the body language of the coach than by the action on the field. Maybe it's because I don't really like football that much. But the coach, he sits on the edge of his seat, deep concentration, consumed by the action on the field, intervening when required, swapping players, giving direction when players come off the field, but you never see him running up and down the field with the players. Now, even to a football novice like me, it's clear that players are following the coach's predetermined game plan, and he sits there monitoring their performance, adjusting as necessary, and willing for them to succeed. And I think that's what we need to do with our team. We need to take responsibility for outcomes. I think a clear illustration is when the 3 young Black English players missed the penalty kick a couple of months ago during the European Championship finals. I loved what the coach said, Gareth Southgate. He took full responsibility for his choices and also the outcome. And he was quoted as saying, "They're the best takers we had left on the field, and we win and lose together." And I think for us as directors, there's a lot for us to learn from that. We agree the game plan together with our senior managers. We give our team targets, fair targets, to be able to meet the plan ethically. We support them to succeed. And really, if having done their best, things don't work out, we absolutely shouldn't throw them under the bus. I think it's that kind of overly punitive behavior. So you are punishing the outcome rather than the process. I think it's that kind of behavior that pushes people to falsify figures, to do all sorts of things, because they know they work within an organization where if things don't work out the way they were meant to work out, even if you've done exactly what you were supposed to do, you're going to be crucified. So it has that impact. It also has the impact that people don't surface their good ideas anymore because they think, those ones who surface ideas, they're out with their CV. They're out with their CV begging for a job. You know what I mean? I better keep quiet. Let them just tell me everything I'm supposed to do and I will do it. I have an idea of how to do it better, but I'm not going to surface it because I think if it doesn't work out, I'm going to be, I'm going to be punished. So I think as directors, we have to lead. We have to lead consistently in good times and bad times. And I think as directors, most importantly, corporate governance has to be non-negotiable for us. I ran the pension fund for many years, and I've remained involved in the pension industry, looking at sort of various investment decisions. And I can tell you that in selecting equities, when you're looking as an investment manager, corporate governance is as important a factor as dividend payouts, corporate performance, all those other things. And why? Because a company that's weak in corporate governance, even in Nigeria, will eventually come unstuck. If the board has directors that routinely have undeclared conflicts of interest, etc., it's unlikely that they're going to consistently make the best decisions. If the employment decisions aren't based on merit, how are they going to assemble that crack A team? And the list goes on. I think another thing we need to do differently as directors is ensure that we have alignment between how the company is doing and what we're earning. You have that all too familiar scenario where the company is going down, shareholders are suffering, but the directors, their cars are getting bigger, their checks are getting bigger, almost as if they're operating in Mars and everybody else is on Earth. It can't continue like that. We have to be held accountable for the outcome within our organizations. And I think also we can't shy away from taking tough decisions. If we have, and I think particularly in Nigeria, our culture is that, you want to take Gary from his mouth, he has a wife and kids, etc. If people are poor performers, they've been coached, they can't perform better, then I think they need to feel that in terms of, bonuses or, services no longer required, whatever it is, because, consistently giving large bonuses to non-performing staff is not only unethical, it's also unfair to the strong performers within the organization. So I know, there are many experienced directors on this call, but I think, we all learn from each other. I think it's good to refresh ourselves. It's good to learn new things. And I will conclude by saying that, the role as director, it's a fiduciary role. It's an important role in any organization. And I think as we go about our business, or to quote our daughter, checking other people's work, we need to do so in a way that builds them up, encourages them to deliver optimal business value within an ethical governance framework. I hope you found those points useful. Thank you.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. And I actually have nothing more to add to that comment. I think that is a very, very nice way to wrap up this discussion with the panel. And I'm going to lean on the DG. I think we have time. Time is fast spent. We have time for maybe one or two questions from participants. I don't know if the DG has selected, they've been compiling some of the questions to ask us. So, in summary, what all our distinguished panelists and keynote speaker have said. I don't know, Auntie Mo, I don't know whether I should ask Auntie Mo to say something at this stage before, or would you rather just hear the questions, our keynote speaker, before you make the closing remark? Yes, okay, she's given me a nod. So, being a director, as has been said, is a big job. It's a very, serving on a board is a big job. And it's the days of, going to sit on a board to collect sitting allowances and not be vigilant are over. But, the challenge, which is why we're having this conversation today, is that most of the time on boards, we start talking about business strategy, which we should do. We talk about business expansion. We talk about business risks, and we talk about enforcement and regulatory issues. And all of these issues tend to take priority. And very little time and attention is actually paid to ethics. That's the truth. Similarly, a lot of times on the boards, you talk about all these things, and even if you have functional reporting, at the bottom of the list is probably human resources and people management. Meanwhile, it is those people, that deliver the value. So again, you have to question that strategy. So on that note, DG, are you?
Yes.
Can I hand over to you now?
Okay, thank you very much.
To assist with the questions from the audience that are most pertinent at this stage.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think you will still be helping in deciding who takes the questions. The first one is from, the first one I picked here is from Olushina Olulana. And this question is concerned with the public sector. It says, though there are no angels anywhere, but it's becoming increasingly difficult for top-notch individuals to be ethically sound in the public service. And he asked, what can the private sector do to help these people in the public sector on this issue of being ethically sound?
Okay, so which one of our panelists, just by show of hands, would be happy to take a stab at responding to that question? No takers? Okay, thank you, Prof. Yes. Both of you. After Prof, you can also contribute.
I'll yield to the lady. Ms. Ayeni, please go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I would just say a couple of quick things. I mean, I think the codes of ethics, etc., that we're rolling out in the private sector are just as relevant in the public sector. But I think more importantly, the way in which the private sector engages with the public sector. If there are no bribe givers, there will be no bribe takers. I think it's simple and straightforward. At the end of the day, the people in the public sector are going to do their work. They will decide to do their work quicker for a bribe giver than for a non-bribe giver, because that bribe giver exists. If as industry bodies, as a private sector, we're saying we're not going to do that anymore, you might have a hiatus where nothing much happens. But then, that's for me a very clear way of showing that, times have changed. It doesn't work like that anymore. And actually the way you now make progress in the public sector is by doing your work properly. So I think it's a public sector responsibility to get their ducks in a row, but I think it's just as important a private sector responsibility. And I'll give an example. Many years ago, talking to an expatriate colleague, and what he said is, the reason we don't do this in our country is that, who would we do it to? That discussion doesn't happen. He says, but you kind of come to Nigeria and it's the line of least resistance. To offer that as the line of least resistance, it seems to be the easiest thing to do. And everybody around you is doing it. So I think we need to change the narrative from a private sector point of view very quickly. And we will soon see the ripple effects in the public sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Prof, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I'll just share with an illustration. A friend of mine became a commissioner for a state government, and they processed at that time 5 million naira for him to come back from the state to Lagos. The air ticket was 7,000 naira Okada then, and he turned it down. And he was told his predecessor spent more than 10 million per such trips. What I'm saying is that if you get into the public sector, you have to have your eyes wide open, because what they were looking for was for him to just indulge in one, and he would have lost the moral argument to talk about what is proportional and what is not. So it's important when you get in there, get some advisors who will tell you how civil servants work. You will understand the concept of minuting and non-minuting, because sometimes just procedural irregularities, all they need to get you fried. Not actual substantive fraud, procedural irregularity. So you need to be schooled that you're moving into the public sector, understand the way they do things, else you may slip. And so that's my answer to the question, why is it that some ethical people going, and I don't know whether you're referring to NIPC, but it does happen and you have to be vigilant. And by the way, I have a lot of respect for the lady. She did nothing wrong, but you have to be careful and be schooled. And just to end this, news is always against the person who tried to live well.
Yes.
Once there's a headline on Google, majority will, you see, human nature enjoys bad news, and I'm not indicting anyone. and that's why it sells. And half the people will say, no wonder. So you going into the public sector, if you had only one jacket of ethics, you need two. You need extra caution. You need to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much indeed. DG, next question.
Thank you. The next question is asking, I think this is from Patricia Fagure, and she asks if there are more pressure on executive directors than non-executive directors on the issues of ethics. Are there more pressures on EDs than NEDs?
Who would like to take that? Auntie Mo, would you like to share your perspective on that?
Incidentally, the Patricia Fagure is my friend. So I was keeping quiet. There will be different pressures because it is the EDs that are in direct contact with the customers. So they are the people that are under pressure to perform. And I liked what Yemisi said, that even when we are giving targets, we need to be very careful in the targets that we give, knowing fully well that this person might not be able to fulfill the targets in an ethical way. So when we give target, we need to be very careful. So yes, I do believe that the pressure is more on EDs rather than NEDs. Remember, NEDs are staying at the periphery of the action. So they're just looking at what is being done. And truly, at times, it depends on what is brought to the table. You don't really have a full knowledge of what is happening in an organization. So the perspective of the EDs compared to the NEDs will certainly be different. But because the EDs are the ones that are directly interfacing with customers, certainly the pressures will be higher because they need to fulfill their targets. They need to perform, so to say. The NEDs are just there making sure, so to say, that the targets are achieved. So yes, I do believe that pressures are going to be more on EDs rather than the NEDs.
I think that's a very interesting question, because I mean, again, if one or two of you could also give perspective on the difference between the pressure also, if you're a publicly listed company, and even for many private multinationals where you have quarterly reports. So it's not even a question of what pressure necessarily your directors are putting on the executive, but there's the issue of the pressure that the analysts and shareholders, the market places on the executive team, and by extension the board. I don't know if Mr. Shegun Olukotoye, would you like to comment on this aspect?
Mrs. Bello Olushoga was spot on. Executives are the one right on the firing line. You have the mandate to deliver on budgets. You interface directly with the customers. You are the first line, so to speak, of attack on ethical and compliance issue. So we also have, I think a dilemma we have is about executive pay and compensation as well, tied to budget. So when executive have a budget to deliver and remuneration is also tied largely to that, you also have pressure to want to deliver. And sometimes balancing delivering on budget and how you go about it could be a major issue for directors. However, I mean, non-executive get their own pressure. And I remember my chairman, my famous chairman, will get people call them up to say, we need a contract, help me employ this, help me employ that. Unfortunately, the pressure comes back to the executive. My chairman will say, Shegun, I know the rules, but it's not for me to go and interpret rules. Please tell them and call this individual, write them a note, let them know, oh, this candidate is not qualified. However, if you have qualified candidates, send them to us, we'll take them through a process. So obviously, without any doubt, the executive faces, they face a lot more pressure than the NEDs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. DG, are we done, or is there one more question?
Actually, we still have quite a lot, but I will just choose maybe one or two more. There is one that I think I will answer myself, and that question is from KRA. She asked, can you provide starter code of ethics template that we can use? I will just direct her straight to the IOD website, where the IOD Code of Ethics is. You just download that, and that can be a very good place to start. I hope I'm right, Mrs. Oyabola.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much for that, DG.
Yes, sir. So the next one I would take is the one that talks about setting unrealistic targets and how it impacts on ethical behavior. And the question from Yabo Soshino is, why is management allowed to do this? Setting unrealistic target that will impact on ethical behavior.
Okay, so who would like to take a stab? Antimo? I see Antimo's hand up. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You see, for me, what is unrealistic? It depends on the budgeting process. I always will go back to GT and access, right? So when you see a budget and somebody comes, I remember when we just started, to make 5 million was a lot of money per month, right? But if your budget is so detailed as to, these are the customers that I'm going to get this money from, these are the products that I'm going to sell, these are the loans that I'm going to get, these are the deposits I'm going to break, these are my overheads, these are my costs and things like that. Once the budget is broken down, then you can see whether it is realistic or unrealistic. So when you have a budget that you can't prove where the money is going to come from, and somebody just says, okay, go and make me 100 million, without determining where the 100 million is coming from, that is where the issue, that is where the problem will come from. However, if I say I'm going to make 100 million and I have sat down, you know, giving gratis, giving facilitation, brokerage is the line of least resistance. So if I pay a brokerage of 2%, I can get 2 billion in deposit. However, for me to be able to get that 2 billion in deposit without paying any amount, do you know the amount of work, the amount of creativity, innovation, and the sheer professionalism that I would have to bring to the table to be able to convince the person that is depositing that that it's okay to give me that money without brokerage. So it is very, very, it's very, very difficult, right, to make money without paying a bribe, or it's more difficult to make money ethically, but you can do it. And GT has proven that it is doable. So what is too much? Right? If it is too much, it is because you haven't been able to think through what you need to do to be able to make that amount. So when you see a figure, those figures have to be proven line by line, right? And it's easy for you to monitor, right? So if I say I'm going to book 100 million, I mean, our budgets are so detailed in those days that, okay, if I'm going to book 100 million, okay, I'm going to give Guinness 50 million, I'm going to give MBL 10 million, I'm going to give Mosondelo and Co. half 500,000. So when I'm marketing, I have those things at the back of my mind. And once I've done that, I know I can take that. And if I can't give the Guinness a 50 million facility, can I give MDL and things like that? It is when your budget is not thorough that you can now say it is unrealistic, right? So when you have a very, very thorough budgeting process, you know, then people will know that, okay, this is what is doable. And if you can't prove that, then you know it is not doable. And as Yamisi said, when you not tell somebody, just go and make that money, then you shouldn't be surprised if they go through the unethical way to make the money, because it is line of least resistance.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Mrs. Bello Lushoga. See, the issue really is, you see, whether the budgeting process is bottom up or top down. So that is a major question. I've seen both, you know, and a lot of times you find the organization at the top, the board will say, and sometimes not even the board, if you're part of a huge group, sometimes, you know, you just, the board, the local operation will just get an instruction, you know, the mandate is that we expect X from this market. And it then translates into the CEO scorecard, which is defined and fixed, which determines how he will be rewarded. So he signs off on that. And then he just comes down into the organization and mandates and instructs the EDs to say, okay, you know, I'm expecting XYZ from this and XYZ from that. So, but if the budgeting process, you know, is, you know, I'm not an accountant, but the ABC customer is bottom up, then, you know, some of these ethical issues that we're talking about will not arise, because the other way tends to drive rent-seeking behavior, you know, where revenue trumps absolutely everything, including ethics. DG.
Okay, I think we should just make this one the last one. Fortunately, I have to apologize to every other person that had questions here. Our time is not, it's very short. And this question talks about the excesses of insider abuse and what can we do to a question where a company's rule and regulation permits institutional shareholders to buy from or sell to an organization in which they rule supreme. How best and who checks the excess of insider abuse that potentially inheres?
Prof, can you help us with this very difficult question?
Well, yes, thank you so much, Chair. First of all is that the comprehensive regime of rules at the SEC for insider trading and the stock exchange for closed periods when a closed period is open. What is important is execution, you know, to enforce those, and it is the responsibility of the board. All the regimes, both, SEC, stock exchange, the code, all of them vest that responsibility on the board, and is a non-delegable responsibility. So if there's any infraction, regulator will go after the board members. What is to be done is to put a strong regime from compliance internally to internal audits to enlightening people inside to announcing it at the right time so that nobody can claim they didn't know when the closed periods happen. Don't forget, insider trading relates to price-sensitive information. Okay, that is not known to the public. All the elements must sit together. So if it is price sensitive, but the timing is open, then it's then known to everyone. So it's a very technical thing for something that is vested on the board and can be curbed through strict regime and sanction any breach of it. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much indeed. A last question, which I just want to throw in so we don't close without just touching on this very, very quickly, is, you know, and I'm throwing this open to all the panelists, you know, who in the organization should champion ethics? Who should champion ethics? Because, you know, you have so many different parts of the business. Sometimes it should be a collaborative thing, different parts, but so many elements in the business, you know, believe it should sit with them. Does it matter where it sits? What are your thoughts? If you could all just take a stab at this, 1 minute each, please. Should I start with you, Mr. Olukotoye?
We have a role, like I said earlier in my earlier submission, a role for Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer in some institution. For banks, for instance, we have Chief Compliance Officer. The responsibility, the day-to-day management of compliance issues sits with that individual. And just so the individual who have a good level of independence reports directly to a committee of the board, to the board, so to speak. For me, what is important is not so much about the designation or the title or whatever given. What is important is, do we pay attention to this? Do we manage this risk appropriately in our institution. Name is just name. You can call it whatever name you give to. But what should not happen is in an institution where that responsibility is not really communicated as somebody's responsibility, and everyone is fighting for a space to manage compliance, manage ethics, then there'll be confusion in the house. Whatever name you call it is not as important for me as having that function in the place and run it properly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Prof, do you want to say anything on this issue?
Well, I think who should champion it? Everybody. That's a short answer. Everybody. That will be all.
Thank you. And Timo? Oh, let me see your back. Oh, great. Let me see. Did you hear the question?
No, unfortunately, I didn't, but I'll just listen.
Okay, thank you. And Timo, the last word.
Prof, you know, as just like risk is the function of everybody, we should always all be risk managers. So also everybody should be an ethical manager of sorts, right? Yes, there's somebody who's going to be looking at you, but once each and every one of us decide that, okay, I will manage myself, you will manage yourself, everybody manages themselves. So the organization with the totality of everybody becomes very, very ethical.
Thank you so much. Madam President, at this point, would you like to say something before we hand over to the DG to make the closing remarks and to wrap this session up?
Thank you very much, Mrs. Oyabola. I must say it has been a very, very exciting exciting session from panelists and keynote speaker. And I like the way they have practicalized everything. And I'm sure that the attendees have learned one or two things. And it's not a one-day thing. We'll keep the engagement going until we get to where we want to be. Like Mrs. Yemisi Ayeni said, the responsibility is ours. It's ours to do. It's ours to make sure that we get to our promised land. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So on this note, I want to say a very big thank you to our panelists. The thank you is going to be done by the DG, but I think it would be remiss of me not to at least just say a very big thank you to all of you. It's been fantastic. Even for me, I have enjoyed it thoroughly. Our keynote speaker, set the tone beautifully, and all the panelists, your contributions have just been so enlightening. Thank you so much. DG, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Madam. And I will just join you to say a very big thank you to first our keynote address, our keynote speaker, beg your pardon, Mrs. Mosun Bele Olushoga. We really appreciate the practical way you brought this to the fore. Thank you very much, Madam. And of course, to our panelists, Mrs. Yemisi Ayeni, Professor Fabian Ajogu, San, and Mr. Segun Oloketui. I say a very big thank you on behalf of the Institute. I say a very big thank you to you all for what you've done here today. The comments from the participants has been, if you can rate it, we rate it an A+. So say very, very thank you to you. And of course, to our wonderful moderator who today is wearing two caps. She put this together and she also decided to coordinate it, which is very wonderful. I say a very big thank you to you, Mrs. Amina Oyabola, Chairman of our Ethics Committee and a council member of the Institute. Thank you very much, Madam. And of course, to our Chief Host, Madam President, we say thank you for the leadership. We say thank you for bringing us all together. And I think I will leave you all with the words of Warren Buffett, which I'm sure you've heard over and over and over again. And it comes about the issue of integrity. And that you in looking for people, look for three things in a person: intelligence, energy, and integrity. And you don't find the third one, the last one, don't bother to look for the two. Integrity speaks to ethics. And I think if we can just address the issue of ethics more than we do all these other things, our country will be better for it. What do we do when we know nobody will chastise us, when we know nobody can stop us, when we know we have the power to do anything? What do we do? What action do we take? as simple as what you ask your drivers to do when the traffic is bad. Do you ask the driver to just follow the others and face the traffic? Or do you just tell him not to do the wrong thing? And your driver can say, when you are not there, I'm sorry, I won't do it. My Oga will not agree. These are very important things. So I say very big thank you to you all. And of course, to our theming participants, I say thank you for your time. I'm happy to know that you all stayed throughout the over 2-hour program. We say thank you very much. And I wish us all a very wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Cheers.
Well
Bye.
done.
Thank you, Antimo. Thank you, Yemisi. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Amina.
Thank you,
Yemisi.
Shegun.
Good to see you.
Thank
My Canadian.
Well done. Well
Thank you very
done.
much, Madam President.
I'll greet
Well
you.
done, our keynote speaker. Well done, our panelists.
Thank
We've learned a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much for having us.
Thank
Have a
you,
good
everybody.
afternoon.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We thank God, oh, it's over.